Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for, joining us for the Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protections webinar, covering an overview of Chicago's paid leave and paid sick leave ordinance, as well as additional educational resources. As Stella previously stated, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and the department's Assistant Commissioner, Adam Weller, will be manning that box and answering those questions. In addition, at the end of this presentation, we will have an additional question and answer session. This is the agenda of today's webinar. The OLS overview and mission. Then we will give a brief overview of the Chicago paid leave and paid sick and safe leave ordinance. What are some best practices? Who is covered by the ordinance? What is meant when we say paid leave and paid sick leave? The accrual and usage of both the paid leave and paid sick leave. Carryover of and payout of the paid leave or paid sick leave. And then we will go over the OLS website and the different sections that are on there, such as the frequently asked questions document, the paid leave and paid sick leave rules and navigating the city rules portal, and then the new educational resources section that was recently established that contains employer model policies of the different paid leave and paid sick leave, a employer checklist, a cross jurisdictional comparison chart, and a detailed fact sheet for the paid leave and paid sick leave ordinance. And then we will cover the BACP YouTube channel, and then we'll provide you with the contact information for the department should you have any further questions. So the OLS overview and mission: the Office of Labor Standards is dedicated to promoting and enforcing Chicago's labor laws. Those labor laws include the anti-retaliation provision, which is in all of the ordinances, the domestic worker contract requirements, the Fair Work Week ordinance, the Chicago minimum wage ordinance, the paid leave and paid sick and safe leave ordinance, and the wage theft ordinance. So the Office of Labor Standards seeks to engage communities and protect workers through a strong investigation and enforcement regime. OLS processes complaints, conducts investigations, mediates disputes, directs settlement proceedings, issues violations, and, if necessary, seeks licensure discipline against any employer. OLS also provides outreach and education to employers and workers. And those figures that are on the right-hand side of the screen are the facts and figures from January through December of 2023 for the Office of Labor Standards. We received over 600 labor standards complaints. Of those 600, we were able to close over 400 of them. And those closures of 400, we were able to realize $430,000 in restitution that were paid directly to the workers of the city. Some best practices for the ordinance. This presentation is intended to offer general guidance on the Chicago paid leave and paid sick and safe leave ordinance. OLS cannot provide any legal advice. Should employers have any questions, they should consult their own legal counsel to determine any actions that they should or should not take to comply with the ordinance. So who is covered under the ordinance? The ordinance guarantees up to 5 days of paid leave and 5 days of paid sick leave for most of Chicago's workers. A covered employee means any employee who works at least 80 hours for an employer within any 120-day period, while physically present within the geographical boundaries of the city. An employee means any individual that performs work for an employer in the capacity of an employee, as distinguished from a contractor determined pursuant to Internal Revenue Service guidelines. And an employer means any person who gainfully employs at least one employee in the capacity of an employee and not an independent contractor. So what that means is, are you basically a W-2 employee or a 1099 independent contractor? So it covers the W-2 employees. Should be noted that collective bargaining agreements that were in effect prior to July 1st, 2024, those do not need to have a waiver of the paid leave and paid sick leave ordinance. However, any CBA that is initiated after July 1st, 2024 can waive the ordinance, but they need to have the waiver set forth in a clear and unambiguous terms. So on the right-hand side, we go over with what is a covered employee. A covered employee is anyone who works full-time, part-time, temporary, seasonal, remote, and is a domestic worker. Please note that a domestic worker also covers any 1099 domestic workers. They do not solely need to be W-2 employees to be covered under this ordinance. And an employer is any corporation, sole proprietor, partnership, not-for-profit, any sister agency such as the City Colleges of Chicago, Chicago Park District, Chicago Transit Authority, the Chicago Housing Authority, or the Public Building Commission. And then anybody that employs a domestic worker. So what is meant when we say paid leave and paid sick leave? Paid leave means any time that is provided by an employer and can be used for any reason and is not paid sick leave. Employees are not required to provide an employer with a reason to use paid leave and may not be required to provide documentation or certification as proof of use or in support the use of paid leave. Paid sick leave is time that is provided by an employer and can be used to recover from illness, take care of a family member, address domestic violence situations, and/or public health emergencies. Unlike paid leave, an employer may request documentation or certification for use of paid sick leave only after an employee uses paid sick leave for 3 consecutive work days. Also not noted on here, paid sick leave can be used for preventative care, such as doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, taking family members, children to their doctor's appointments as well. The accrual and usage of the paid leave and paid sick leave. First, we'll go over paid leave eligibility. It's any covered employees hired before 7/1/2024. They will begin accruing paid leave on 7/1/2024. The covered employees hired after 7/1/2024 are eligible to accrue paid leave upon the start of their employment. Covered employees may request to use their paid leave 90 days after July 1st, 2024, or 90 days after the start of their employment, whichever date is later. The rate of accrual for paid leave, a minimum of 1 hour of paid leave is accrued for every 35 hours worked. And there is also a cap of 40 hours or 5 days that is accrued during a single benefit year. And a benefit year is defined as a consecutive 12-month period. Paid leave can be used for any reason, but a request to use can be denied by the employer for certain circumstances. And there is a minimum usage increment that is not to exceed 4 hours when using paid leave. And that 4 hours is the highest minimum that can be set. However, an employer may allow a lesser increment to be used. Paid sick leave. Covered employees hired before 7/1/2024 will begin accruing paid sick leave on 7/1/2024. However, as we know, there was a notice or an ordinance in place before that guaranteed paid sick leave. And any time that was accrued prior to 7/1/24 will just be transferred over to be covered under the new ordinance. Covered employees hired after 7/1/2024 are eligible to accrue paid sick leave upon the start of employment. And the covered employees may request to use paid sick leave 30 days after July 1st, 24, or 30 days after the start of their employment, whichever date is later. The rate of accrual for paid sick leave, similar to paid leave, a minimum of 1 hour is accrued for every 35 hours worked. And there is up to 40 hours or 5 days that is accrued during a single benefit year. And again, that's a consecutive 12-month period. Paid sick leave can only be used to recover from illnesses, take care of family members, address domestic violence situations or public health emergencies. And the minimum usage increment for using paid sick leave cannot be greater than 2 hours. However, the employer can also set a lesser amount. So the accrual and usage of the paid leave continued. General provisions applicable to both paid leave and paid sick leave. There are various accrual methods that can be utilized. Employers may front load the full amount of paid leave and paid sick leave at the beginning of the benefit year. Covered employees must receive written notice of the hours front loaded on or before the benefit year. Front loaded hours may not be reduced once they are granted to a covered employee. And employers may not require covered employees to repay the usage of front-loaded hours if the covered employee ends their employment before the end of the benefit year. Employers may let covered employees accrue paid leave and paid sick leave as they work. So that would be the 1 hour for every 35 hours worked. Or the employers may utilize a mixed calculation method. For example, front loading for full-time covered employees and accruing for part-time covered employees, or front loading paid leave and accruing paid sick leave, or vice versa. A couple increment scenarios covering both paid leave and paid sick leave. For paid leave, for example, Miguel would like to take 2 hours of leave to attend a Cubs game, but the employer may have a policy requiring him to use 4 hours. So he would have to use the full 4 hours and not 2. If Miguel wants to take 4 hours to leave work early to attend a funeral, an employer may not require him to use a full 8 hours instead, as the ordinance mandates that 4 hours can be the highest minimum of use. For paid sick leave, Miguel wants to use 2 hours of leave to attend a dentist appointment. An employer may not require him to use 4 hours or 8 hours instead. Also, if Miguel wakes up with a headache and anticipates running 1 hour late, an employer may require him to use 2 hours of paid sick leave, as that is covered under the ordinance as the highest minimum. Carryover and payout of leave. We'll go over the carryover first. Paid leave, a covered employee can carry up to 16 hours or 2 days of accrued and unused paid leave from one benefit to the year to the next. Please note that if paid leave is front-loaded at the beginning of the benefit year, an employer can choose to not allow carryover. For paid sick leave, an covered employee can carry over up to 80 hours with 10 days of accrued unused paid sick leave from one benefit year to the next. And this carryout provision applies to both accrual and front-loaded methods for paid sick leave. So there will always be a carryover for paid sick leave. The payout of paid leave, both accrued and unused paid leave, whether granted via accrual or front-loading, must be paid out upon termination of employment. So we have currently 3 classifications of employers. There's a large employer, which employs more than 100 or more covered employees. Full payout is required of any unused paid leave at separation of employment. Then there is a medium employer, which is 51 through 100 employees. And they're capped at 16 hours of payout of unused paid leave. But that medium employer is only until July 1st, 2025. At that point, they would transition to a large employer as well. So then it would just be a large and small. And then small employers, anyone between 1 through 50 employees, no payout is required. Please note, payout amount is restricted to the amount of time mandated by the ordinance. Paid sick leave payout. Payout of paid sick leave is not required by the ordinance unless mandated by a collectively bargained agreement. So if there's a CBA in place requiring it, it's still required to be paid out. And then, as I mentioned, the large employer is an employer that has 100 or more covered employees. And the medium employer is anyone from 51 through 100 covered employees. And a small employer is 1 through 50 covered employees. And when determining the employer size, the Office of Labor Standards only considers Chicago employees, not global employees. So if there's more than one location, they're not within the city limits, only the location with the city employees would be counted to determine employer size. Next, we're going to go over the Office of Labor Standards website. The OLS website is a valuable resource tool for employees and employers alike. So each ordinance under OLS jurisdiction will have its own section and clickable box, and each subsection will contain information on the ordinance, any applicable rules pertaining to the ordinance, and additional FAQ documents. You can access the website at chicago.gov/labor standards. So the area on the top right of the screen is a snapshot of what the Labor Standards website looks like, and those boxes of the minimum wage, paid leave and paid sick leave, fair work week, wage theft, and domestic workers are all boxes that can be clicked that will take you to those specific ordinances. There is also a public notice section where you can click and download any of the public notices that are required to be posted at the place of employment. And then there's also the Chicago Labor Law Educational Resource section that has some model policies, fact sheets, and additional resources. There's a section on the new Art is Labor Creative Worker campaign and any deferred action statement of interest questions in both English and Spanish. So under the paid leave and paid sick leave subsection, it will provide you with a quick overview of the ordinance. And then there will be a link to download the public notice that is also required to be posted. And then there are additional resources that will take you to a link that has the frequently asked questions, which are both available in English and Spanish, a link to the paid leave and paid sick leave ordinance, and a link to the rules portal where you can find the rules pertaining to the paid leave and paid sick leave ordinance. The image on the right is a screenshot of the paid leave and paid sick leave subsection. The box up top, it shows you the paid leave facts about earning leave, using leave, and any carryover. And then the gray box is the paid sick and safe leave that also goes over how they earn, use, and carry over that leave. Next, we will go over the FAQ document. So the Office of Labor Standards has received over 620 questions from both employers and employees regarding the new paid leave and paid sick leave ordinance. And on July 2nd, the department updated its FAQ and published a document with 41 of the most common questions. So if you have some questions that you think might be a common one, they're most likely are probably going to be on there, as we've received numerous questions. So the first one is, what changes are coming to the Chicago regarding paid time off? After December 31st, all employers must allow their employees to accrue and use paid sick leave and to use and accrue paid leave. Another example is, when does the accrual paid time begin off under the Chicago paid leave and paid sick and safe leave ordinance? Accrual for paid leave will begin at the start of employment or July 1st, 2024, whichever is later, which is also the same for the paid sick leave. Also available under the paid leave and paid sick leave subsection is a link to the rules portal. And the rules are accessed through the City of Chicago Rules Portal, which you would then filter by the department, and you would choose Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. And it will give you all the rules that pertaining to the BACP. The rules will provide additional clarity and guidance to the Chicago Paid Leave and Paid Sick Leave Ordinance, and they were most recently updated June 24th, 2024, directly prior to when the ordinance went into effect. And then the OLS educational resources. OLS has developed a new educational resource for every Chicago labor law as it pertains to the paid leave and paid sick leave ordinance. There are paid leave resources such as model policies for the employers to assist them with generating a paid leave and paid sick leave policy that would be compliant with the ordinance. There is a checklist for the employers for them to determine if their policy has all the required components and information. There's the Cross Jurisdictional Comparison Chart and an additional fact sheet. Most of these resources are available in 9 languages. Those 9 languages are English, Spanish, Polish, Korean, Mandarin, Tagalog, Thai, Vietnamese, and Ukrainian. So the image on the right, it's just when you click under the model policies, fact sheets, and resources, it will take you to, that's the top half with the model policies and the checklist for employers section. The educational resources for the model policies, they're just templates to aid employers with creating a compliant paid leave and paid sick leave policy. We have provided 6 different templates. They are either a dual bucket, which would separate paid leave and paid sick leave. And under the dual bucket, we have accrual of both paid leave and paid sick leave, front load of both paid leave and paid sick leave, and a mixed calculation of either front load and paid and accrual of one or the other. And then there's the single bucket section, which would combine both the paid leave and the paid sick leave into a single bucket. And under that, there is also the accrual, the front load, or a mixed calculation. A couple of the examples are posted on the screen below. There's the paid leave and paid sick leave model policy for accrual. And then that's the middle section is the front load, and the far right one is a mixed calculation for a combined PTO single bucket. And then the employer checklist. The employer checklist was designed to provide employers a quick reference guide to check if their existing paid leave and paid sick leave policy contained the required items. The employer checklist is not all encompassing and is not legal advice, but just an additional tool to aid employers. And this is also available in 9 languages. The image on the right is a screenshot of what the checklist looks like. So it has your notice requirement. Under that, there's boxes to make sure that you have your notice posted in a conspicuous place in the business, that you provide your new employees prior to start date or on the start date with that notice, that you provide an updated copy of the notice to covered employees every July 1st, and that if needed, that the notice is posted in any other language than English. And then for the policy, that it also has paid leave, paid sick leave provided in writing. And then in that policy, you define your benefit year, what type of calculation method you're using and who they would apply to, your rate of accrual, pre-approval conditions, any conditions for disapproval of paid leave, And again, is the policy available in the covered employee's main language. And here we have the cross jurisdictional comparison chart. This compares the city of Chicago's paid leave and paid sick leave ordinance, the Cook County paid leave ordinance, and the Illinois Paid Leave for All Workers Act. This was created so that we could aid employers who may have employees that work in one jurisdiction, more than one jurisdiction, and assist the employer with creating policies that could be compliant across multiple jurisdictions. And this chart is also available in the 9 languages. So under this chart, this is a sample of a section. It has the date that each ordinance went into effect, who it applies to, who is covered under the ordinance, for what reasons you can use the type of leave that is granted by each ordinance. We also have the educational resources fact sheet. This fact sheet is a quick reference guide of all information pertaining to paid leave and paid sick leave. It is organized into these separate topics and subtopics. And the fact sheet is a helpful tool for both the employers and employees alike. And again, this is one of the resources that is available in the 9 languages. So this is a copy of what the fact sheet looks like. It's 2 pages. So it goes over in brief what the Sydney ordinance covers under the glossary, the definitions that are covered under the ordinance, the employer size for the purposes of payout of the ordinance. And then on the second sheet, it has the accrual of leave, and it breaks down the accrual rate, accruing methods, whether it's front-loaded or accrual, or if you're using a mixed calculation. Then the usage of the leave, reasons you're able to use each type of leave. And then the minimum usage increments for both paid and leave and paid sick leave. Then we have the carryover and payout section. It goes over the carryover of paid leave or payout of any paid leave, if applicable, depending on the employer size, and then carryover of paid sick leave, and then payout of paid sick leave. Also available on the OLS website is a link to our webinars on our YouTube page, which contains recordings of 50 webinars that OLS has hosted throughout the years. Many of the webinars are available in both Spanish along with their English version. And this is the department's contact information. If you have any questions, you can reach us by phone, either on email at the BACP labor standards at cityofchicago.org email, or the BACP outreach at cityofchicago.org email. In addition, you can send any correspondence to 2350 West Ogden Avenue, 2nd floor, Chicago, Illinois, 60608. This concludes today's presentation. We will now open this up to the question and answer section. Any questions?
Hey, Richard,
Hey, Stella.
were you able to answer these questions in the chat box? Or you?
Adam was manning the chat box. I haven't looked at
Okay.
it.
Yeah, all questions have been answered or in the process of. Can you go back to the last page? We had a request to see the last page.
The YouTube page? This one? So let's see. This one says, I'm an employee. I'm in the city of Chicago, so I must give 10 days per year. Correct. It's 40 hours of paid leave and 40 hours of sick leave, which would be equivalent to 10 days. If an employee roll over 80 hours of sick time and be able to accrue 40 hours in the new year, can the employee use all 120 hours sick time that same year? Yes. Employees are entitled to use all available accrued or carried over leave within a single benefit year. Can you confirm it's the number of employees that live in Chicago that determine the size of the organization, not the number of employees total? It's not the number that live in Chicago, it's the number that are covered and work in the city of Chicago, not globally or in any other municipality. Does the any reason include a call off? Like as in they are sick, yes, or there's an emergency, basement flooded, whatever, yes, it can be used under, it's covered under any reason.
We're also getting some questions in the chat too. Somebody asked whether there's a specific size that the employee posters must be.
8 by 10 is fine. Just a standard sheet of 8.5 by 11 is sufficient.
Yeah, that's sufficient for providing that to the employees with their paycheck. For any workplace postings, no less than 11 by 17.
Does this ordinance apply to part-time workers who work less than 30 hours a week? Yes, as long as they work more than 80 hours in a 120-day period. Yes, a copy of these slides will be made available for anyone that would like it. Just please email the BACP labor standards and you will receive a PDF copy.
There's a question about accrual based on 35 hours rather than 40 hours like in the county. And yes, the city of Chicago has a 1 hour accrued per 35 hours rather than 40 hours.
And does my employer have the right to ask me for a return to work statement, even if I take 1 day off, whether it's sick or PTO? No. They can only ask for a certification if it's 3 consecutive days of work. So like a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday or Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, that's the only time you would be able to need to provide certification to return to work. Let's see, there's two more in the Q&A box. All rollover needs to be paid out upon termination, even when that number exceeds 80 hours. Is this in reference to paid leave or paid sick leave? If it's paid leave and you're a large employer, any paid leave they have, whether it's up to 56 hours, is covered by the ordinance. So that would be the max that would need to be paid out. And if it's paid sick leave, it is not required to be paid out under the ordinance. If I already give 10 hours of PTO and they can use for anything, do I not also have to provide accrued sick leave on top of that? No, as long as the current PTO policy meets the minimum requirements under the ordinance, such as the minimum increment usage, no additional time would need to be provided. The employer grants employees 10 days of vacation. Can we consider 5 days as paid leave that can be used as any time, and the remaining 5 days should be scheduled vacation? Doesn't cover, the ordinance doesn't cover vacation as long as your policy is allowing them to use it for whatever reason. You can, so additional 5 days as paid leave would have to meet the requirements of the paid leave section. The additional 5 days, you could mandate usage how you want it if it had to be scheduled all at once, as long as paid sick leave is also being provided in the minimum of 40 hours.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that first sentence meant 5 days as paid sick leave, because they separated paid sick leave from vacation. In that instance, then yes, it speaks exactly to the ordinance requirements.
Yeah. Is that it? I'll put the contact info back up there for anybody else that needs it. All right, Stella, I think we have no more questions.
Okay. Well, I will stop the recording.